Treason is not the reason for the season. FAQ number 5, doesn't Chicago prove that gun control doesn't work? Thank you for your question. The United States has a national gun homicide rate of 4.4, ranking 17th for worst gun homicide of any nation in the world. Illinois has a gun homicide rate of 2.8. Of all 50 states, Illinois ranks 30th for the worst gun homicide rate of any state. However, 2/3 of guns used in crimes in Illinois come from out of state, usually from a state with weak gun laws. These statistics hold up in states like Illinois, California, and New York. Most guns used in crimes in those states actually came from states with weak gun laws, were purchased in a private sale that requires no paperwork at all, and were simply driven across an open state line. If Illinois could seal its borders from gun traffickers, its gun homicide rate would be around 1.1, which would make it rank around 8th in the nation for lowest gun homicide rate. The movement of guns from states with weak gun laws to states with strong gun laws is called the iron pipeline. The iron pipeline supplies criminals with a vast number of guns. And the iron pipeline is possible only because states with weak gun laws are just a car drive away from states with strong gun laws. Hawaii has some of the strongest gun control laws in the nation, with universal background checks and registration. It is also surrounded by 2,000 miles of ocean. Which means criminals in Hawaii cannot jump in a car, drive to a state with weak gun laws, buy a gun with cash and no paperwork, and drive back to Hawaii. The result? Hawaii has one of the lowest gun homicide rates in the country, 0.3. Hawaii shows what strong gun laws can do with a sealed border to prevent people from easily importing guns across state lines. Sealing the borders between states on the mainland is impossible. But, if the universal background checks and registration that give Hawaii one of the lowest gun homicide rates in the nation, if that were made federal law, then it would effectively seal state borders, removing one of the easiest ways for criminals to get guns. Universal background checks and registration at the federal level would mean there would be no state that criminals could drive to and buy a gun anonymously via a private sale and cash. How universal background checks and registration attacks the iron pipeline is explained in detail in video number 9. But the short version is that universal background checks and registration creates a trail of breadcrumbs that leads directly to straw buyers, people who don't have any criminal convictions, so they can pass a background check and buy a gun from a dealer or anyone else, but then they turn around and sell it to a criminal. With the current system where no paperwork is required for private sales, straw buyers can simply claim they sold the gun in a private sale to a nice little old lady at church for cash. Convicting a straw buyer today is essentially impossible. Universal background checks and registration means police can prove the straw buyer never ran a background check on a little old lady and never updated the registration to transfer ownership to the little old lady, meaning the police can prove the straw buyer is guilty of gun trafficking. If 75% of guns used in crimes come from states with weak gun laws, and universal background checks and registration stopped even a third of those weapons from getting into the hands of criminals, that's a 25% drop in the gun homicide rate for the entire nation. The U.S. averages around 14,000 gun homicides a year. A 25% drop means saving thousands of lives every year. About 70,000 guns were recovered from crime scenes in 2021. If universal background checks and registration cut that by 25%, that would eliminate tens of thousands of gun-related crimes every year. So, yes, Illinois has strong gun control laws but still has a high gun homicide rate. But that's because the majority of guns used in crimes in Illinois come from states with weak gun laws. Hawaii has very strong gun laws, and a border that consists of 2,000 miles of ocean, essentially cutting it off from states with weak gun laws, and has one of the lowest gun homicide rates in the nation. Universal background checks and registration, at the federal level, would cut off criminals from the easiest source of guns, straw buyers. It would save thousands of lives a year, could eliminate tens of thousands of gun crimes a year, and would still allow law-abiding people to own firearms. And lastly, just for contrast, of the 9 states with the worst gun homicide rates in the nation, 7 of them are graded F by the Giffords Law Center to prevent gun violence for having the weakest gun laws in the nation. So, deregulated guns translates to the worst gun homicide rates in the nation.